She dreaded letting a human impregnate her until she encountered the soldier. And that, esteemed listeners, is why you should absolutely never allow a human near your breeding chambers. Commander Vila Nix's voice resounded throughout the auditorium as her lecture concluded. Her upper arms gestured emphatically, while her lower pair remained professionally clasped behind her. The assembled cadets chittered nervously, their iridescent scales reflecting the soft azure illumination of the military academy's grand hall. Vila sighed dramatically, her respiratory sacs expanding with practiced precision. Questions? Surely someone has a question. This is literally life or death information for your future assignments. A hesitant cadet in the front row raised a trembling limb. Commander, is it accurate that humans can procreate without an appropriate breeding cycle? Hey, Vala, barked Vila, her secondary eyelids blinking rapidly in amusement. Oh, sweet innocent cadet Proxima. They don't just can, they do it all the time. For pleasure, without even the correct hormonal surges or seasonal restraints. It's utterly barbaric. She paused for effect. And yet, somehow, they've managed to conquer half the Orion arm while we were preoccupied with maintaining our dignified reproductive schedules. The cadets murmured among themselves, a blend of horror and fascination. This was precisely the reaction Vila aimed for in all her xenobiology lectures, trepidation combined with sufficient curiosity to keep these future officers vigilant when interacting with the newest and most unpredictable members of the Galactic Confederation. As the lecture hall emptied, Vila gathered her data crystals and slipped them into her uniform pocket. Another day, another group of impressionable minds filled with her meticulously crafted prejudices against humans. Not that they weren't warranted. Mostly. Her six-fingered hand unconsciously traced the scar that bisected her jawline, a lasting memento of her first, and nearly last, encounter with a human merchant vessel. Impressive lecture, as always, Commander. The familiar voice of Admiral Krell wafted through the air behind her. Vila stiffened reflexively. Thank you, Admiral. Just doing my part to prepare our cadets for reality. Krell's membranous frills expanded slightly, a sign of either amusement or annoyance. Vila could never quite discern it with the amphibious old veteran. Reality, Nix, or your interpretation of it? With respect, sir, I possess more practical experience with humans than anyone else in this quadrant. Precisely why I'm here. Krell presented her with a sealed data capsule, the type reserved for top priority assignments. Your new orders, effective immediately. Vila's secondary heart skipped a beat as she broke the seal and scanned the contents. Her scales flushed a deep violet of distress. This must be a mistake. A diplomatic escort mission for a human delegation? Sir, my expertise lies in tactical assessment, and you're our foremost expert on human psychology and physiology, Krell interrupted, appearing far too pleased with himself. The ambassador specifically requested you by name. Which ambassador? Vila inquired suspiciously, her dorsal spines involuntarily straightening in alarm. Ambassador Lena Torres. Apparently, your reputation precedes you, Commander. The Admiral's lipless mouth stretched into what passed for a smile among his species. Your transport departs in 3 hours. I suggest you pack light. I hear Earth's gravity presents a challenge for our kind. As the Admiral glided away, Vila unleashed a string of expletives that would have made even a seasoned Space Marine's translator malfunction. After 5 cycles of diligently maintaining her distance from humans, while studying them through secure channels and second-hand accounts, she was being thrust directly into their midst. And during her breeding cycle, no less. Just perfect. First encounter with humans and misconceptions, the diplomatic shuttle reeked of human. There was simply no other way to describe it. Vila's sensitive olfactory glands contracted painfully as she boarded the vessel, causing her to sneeze violently, all 4 nostrils flaring in protest. Bless you, or whatever the equivalent is for your species, came a cheerful voice that Vila immediately classified as dangerously friendly. She straightened her uniform and fixed her gaze on the human female approaching her. Ambassador Lena Torres was shorter than Vila had expected, with dark, curly hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, a term that had greatly confused Vila during her initial research, as humans definitively did not possess tails.
Commander Nix, reporting for duty, Vila said stiffly, deliberately not extending any of her forearms in greeting.
She knew humans had a bizarre obsession with touching appendages upon meeting, a Mandalorian-like barbaric habit.
The ambassador smiled, revealing those unsettling flat teeth.
No need for formalities, Commander. We'll be working closely together for the next few weeks. Besides, I've read all your papers on cross-species diplomacy.
Fascinating perspectives.
Vila's scales rippled with surprise.
You've read my academic work?
Oh, yes. Your analysis of pheromone-based communication barriers between oxygen and methane breathers was groundbreaking. Though I did find your section on human mating rituals a bit, Torres paused, her lips twitching, creative. Heat rushed to Vila's facial scales. By the void, had this human actually read her early, flawed research, the stuff based primarily on intercepted human entertainment broadcasts, before she could formulate a response that wouldn't violate 16 diplomatic protocols? A loud crash from the cargo bay saved her. That would be Captain Riker with your luggage, Torres explained with a sigh. He's an excellent soldier, but somewhat enthusiastic about helping. A soldier? I was told this was a diplomatic mission. Vila's defensive spines began to rise involuntarily. Torres nodded. It is, but given recent tensions with the Sictal horde, the Council insisted we bring security.
Captain Riker leads our protective detail.
Right on cue, a tall human male emerged from the cargo bay, carrying what appeared to be Vila's personal storage container as if it weighed nothing, which was impossible, given that it contained her gravity compensators. Got it all sorted, Ambassador, though I'm not sure why anyone needs this many shoes for a 2-week. He stopped abruptly upon noticing Vila.
Commander Nix, honor to meet you.
Dean Riker, Earth Defense Force. Vila blinked rapidly in confusion. The human wasn't at all what she expected. Based on her studies, military humans were supposed to be bulky, aggressive, and loud. This one was lean, moved with unexpected grace, and spoke with a calm, measured voice that somehow made her tertiary auditory canal tingle. Those aren't shoes, she blurted out, immediately regretting her lack of composure. They're gravitational stabilizers. Your planet's pull would crush my internal organs without them. Instead of being offended, the human Riker laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement that crinkled the corners of his eyes.
Well, that would put a damper on our mission, wouldn't it?
I'll make sure they're properly secured. For the first time in her career, Vila found herself momentarily speechless in the presence of a human. This was not according to protocol.
Not at all. Meeting the human soldier. Unexpected attraction.
3 Earth days into the journey to the diplomatic summit on Proxima Station, and Vila was begrudgingly updating her field notes on humans, specifically on Captain Dean Riker. Computer, observation 47B, she muttered as she paced her quarters.
Human military personnel appear capable of surprising restraint in social settings.
Subject Riker has not once attempted to dominate conversation with breeding displays or physical intimidation, as previously documented in human males. The computer chirped acknowledgement as Vila collapsed onto her resting platform. Her breeding cycle was approaching faster than anticipated. Perhaps it was the stress of the mission. Or maybe, though she hated to admit it, the constant proximity to humans was affecting her biology in unexpected ways.
A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Commander, it's Riker. The ambassador asked me to bring you these reports before our approach to the checkpoint.
Vila quickly straightened her uniform and tried to compose herself. Enter. The door slid open, and Captain Riker stepped in, holding a datapad. He immediately wrinkled his nose, but quickly smoothed his expression. Vila felt her scales flush with embarrassment. Of course, her pre-breeding pheromones would be detectable to him, even with his limited human senses. I can come back later if this is a bad time, he offered, keeping a respectful distance. No, it's fine, she said curtly, extending one of her upper arms for the datapad. I'm perfectly capable of maintaining professional decorum despite my current biological state. Riker handed her the device, surprisingly careful not to make physical contact. I never suggested otherwise, Commander. There was a hint of amusement in his voice that should have irritated her, but somehow didn't.
What is it? She demanded, noticing his lingering gaze. Nothing.
It's just, your scales.
They're changing color. It's quite remarkable.
Vila instinctively reached to touch the scales along her neck, which she knew would be shifting from their normal blue to a deep, iridescent purple.
A display meant to attract potential mates. How mortifying.
A simple biological response, she said stiffly.
Nothing for you to concern yourself with. Riker nodded, but didn't immediately leave.
Instead, he leaned against the wall, studying her with an intensity that made all four of her arms feel suddenly restless. You know, he said casually, when I was stationed on Dowie 4, I served alongside a squad of your people.
They taught me a bit about Nexarian physiology.
Vila narrowed her eyes.
Did they now? Enough to know that what you're experiencing isn't easy.
They had special chambers on the base, regulated atmosphere, to help manage the symptoms. We're not discussing this, Vila said sharply, but without the bite she intended.
Riker straightened up.
Of course.
My apologies, Commander. I just wanted to say that if you need accommodations, you only have to ask. No explanation necessary.
As he turned to leave, Vila felt a peculiar sensation in her secondary cardiac chamber. Not the usual contempt she harbored for humans, but something more complex. Captain, she called out before she could stop herself. He paused at the doorway, looking back with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes.
Is the observation deck still restricted during third shift?
A small smile played at the corners of his mouth.
Not if you have a security escort. I happen to be on duty tonight. Perhaps I'll take a walk then. For my health.
For your health, he agreed with a nod that conveyed understanding without pity, a distinction Vila hadn't expected any human capable of making.
After he left, Vila sank back onto her resting platform, her thoughts in disarray.
This wasn't according to any protocol she'd established for herself.
This wasn't scientific observation.
This was something dangerous, something she'd warned countless cadets against. This was attraction.
Cultural conflicts and growing relationship.
The observation deck was mercifully empty when Vila arrived, except for Captain Riker, who stood silhouetted against the vast starfield. He didn't turn as she approached, yet somehow she knew he was aware of her presence. You came, he said simply, still gazing outward. I said I would, Vila replied, keeping her voice professional despite the strange flutter in her tertiary digestive sac.
I assume Ambassador Torres briefed you on the Proxima Station protocols?
Riker turned then, his face half illuminated by starlight.
She did. But I'd rather hear your perspective. Your actual perspective. Not the official one you're obligated to give.
Vila snorted, a habit she'd picked up from too many diplomatic functions.
My, aren't we presumptuous? What makes you think there's a difference?
Because, Riker said, stepping closer but still maintaining a respectful distance, I've read every one of your published papers, Commander.
And I've read your military file. They don't match up. You've read my?
Vila's scales flashed with indignation.
That's classified information.
Riker shrugged unapologetically.
Security clearance. Need to know basis. And I needed to know who I was protecting.
I don't need protection, she snapped, all four hands curling into fists.
No, he agreed easily. But you might need someone who understands what actually happened on the GSV Intrepid.
Vila felt as though she'd been doused in ice water. The Intrepid, the merchant vessel where she'd gotten her scar, nearly died at human hands, or so her official report stated. How dare you, she hissed, her vocal sacs constricting with emotion. You have no right, you protected them, Riker interrupted softly.
3 human children.
You violated direct orders and smuggled them to safety when your commander wanted to use them as bargaining chips with the pirates.
Vila's hearts pounded erratically. No one knew this.
No one, except herself and those children, who would now be adults if they'd survived. The official report says you were attacked by the human crew, Riker continued.
But the scar on your jaw? That's from a trellier blade. pirates use those, not human merchants. What do you want from me?
Vila demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Riker took another step closer, close enough that she could detect his unique scent.
Something earthy and unfamiliar, yet not unpleasant. The truth, he said. Because this mission isn't what you think it is. And I need to know if you're really the person who would save 3 alien children at the risk of her own career, or if you're the xenophobe who teaches cadets that humans are dangerous breeding machines. Vila laughed bitterly. Perhaps I'm both. Has your limited human psychology considered that possibility? That I can recognize the capacity for good in your species while still finding your breeding practices abhorrent? To her surprise, Riker laughed too, a warm sound that seemed to fill the cold observation deck. Fair enough. And have you considered that I might find some of your customs equally bizarre? 4-month mating cycles tied to astronomical phenomena, ritualized courtship displays involving mathematical proofs? From my perspective, that's pretty strange stuff. Despite herself, Vila felt her anger dissolving. The mathematical proofs are traditional, not mandatory, she found herself explaining. And they're elegant when done properly.
I'm sure they are, Riker said, his expression softening.
Just as some human courtship rituals can be beautiful when they're not being reduced to biological imperatives in a xenobiology lecture.
Touché, Captain, Vila conceded, finding herself strangely comfortable with this verbal sparring.
So, what is this mission really about? If I'm being misled, Riker's expression grew serious. The summit isn't just about trade agreements.
There's going to be a proposal for a genetic exchange program, voluntary, of course, but designed to explore compatible reproductive technologies between our species. Vila's scales flashed a shocked white before she could control her reaction.
That's impossible. Our biology is entirely different. Our genetic structures are more compatible than anyone publicly admits, Riker finished for her. And someone high up in your government doesn't want this research to proceed. And you think I'm part of this conspiracy? Vila asked incredulously.
Riker shook his head.
No. I think you're the key to stopping it. But first, I needed to know if you actually hated humans, or if that was just your professional persona.
Vila stared at him, suddenly seeing Captain Dean Riker in an entirely new light.
I don't hate humans, she said finally. I just don't understand them. But I'm beginning to think that might be my failing, not yours.
His smile in response made something deep within her stir, something dangerous and thrilling and completely against all protocol.
Crisis that brings them together. The diplomatic ship shuddered violently, throwing Vila against the corridor wall.
Her gravitational stabilizers whined in protest as emergency lights flashed crimson throughout the vessel. What in the 7 moons, she hissed, regaining her balance just as the ship-wide comm system crackled to life.
All personnel, battle stations. This is not a drill. We have been intercepted by unmarked vessels. Hostiles have breached the lower decks. Security teams, respond. Vila's military training kicked in instantly.
She extended her retractable claws and moved swiftly toward the bridge, only to collide with Riker rushing in the opposite direction.
Commander! Thank the void.
He grabbed her upper arms, his face grim.
We need to get you to the escape shuttle, now.
I'm not abandoning ship, Captain.
She snapped, attempting to pull away. I'm trained in 17 forms of combat. Another explosion rocked the ship, cutting off her protests.
Riker pulled her down just as a section of ceiling collapsed where they'd been standing.
These aren't random pirates, he said urgently, his face inches from hers.
They're here for you, and the research data.
They're using Krellvac disruptors, military-grade weapons that shouldn't exist outside the Nexarian fleet.
Vila's scales paled.
That's impossible. Those weapons are controlled by your government. Exactly.
Riker's eyes were intense, searching hers. Someone very powerful wants to make sure our species never explores genetic compatibility. Before she could respond, the ship lurched again. The lighting failed completely, plunging them into darkness for 3 terrifying seconds before the emergency systems engaged.
Ambassador Torres? Vila asked suddenly, realizing the human diplomat was nowhere to be seen.
Safe room with the data. If everything went according to plan, Riker pulled a compact pulse weapon from his holster and handed it to her.
But we need to ensure her extraction. The rendezvous point is Deck C, Shuttle Bay 2.
Vila accepted the weapon, surprisingly touched by the gesture of trust.
Lead the way, Captain.
They moved through the damaged ship in perfect sync, covering each other through smoke-filled corridors with a wordless efficiency that surprised them both. As they approached the shuttle bay, the sound of weapons fire intensified.
Ambassador Torres is pinned down, Riker muttered, checking the tactical display on his wrist unit. 4 hostiles between us and her position.
I recognize those biosignatures, Vila said, her voice tight with anger.
Nexarian Special Operations. My own people.
Riker glanced at her, his expression unreadable.
This is your moment, Commander. Where do your loyalties lie?
With the truth, she replied without hesitation, her breeding scales now a brilliant, determined purple, and apparently, with you humans. Together, they burst into the corridor, moving with lethal coordination. Vila's superior agility complemented Riker's tactical precision perfectly. Within moments, 3 of the Nexarian operatives were incapacitated, but the 4th got off a lucky shot. Riker fell with a grunt of pain, clutching his side where the energy pulse had grazed him.
Vila felt an overwhelming rage surge through her body, a protective instinct she'd never experienced before.
With primal ferocity, she launched herself at the final attacker, her combat training enhanced by something more primitive and powerful. When it was over, she rushed to Riker's side, using all 4 hands to assess his wound. "Don't you dare die on me, human," she commanded, applying pressure to the bleeding gash. He looked up at her with pain-filled but amused eyes.
"It would take more than this to get away from you."
"You're delirious," she muttered, but felt relief flood through her as she realized the wound wasn't fatal. "Commander," he said suddenly, serious despite his pain, reaching up to touch her face near the old scar.
"Your scales, they're changing again."
Vila knew without looking that her scales would be displaying the unmistakable pattern of the Nexarian bonding response.
A physiological reaction that couldn't be faked or forced.
A reaction she'd never experienced with any potential mate of her own species. "We have more important things to worry about right now," she said firmly, helping him to his feet. But she didn't deny what they both knew had happened between them. Some barriers, it seemed, were meant to be broken.
Resolution and conclusion.
The escaped shuttle hurtled through space, its engines straining as Ambassador Torres piloted them away from the diplomatic vessel, now drifting dead in space. In the cramped medical bay, Vila applied regenerative gel to Riker's wound, her movements precise despite the shuttle's occasional turbulence. "They'll be sending pursuit craft," Vila said grimly, securing the bandage around Riker's torso.
"My government doesn't give up easily, especially when they've committed this openly to stopping us."
"Neither does mine," Torres called from the cockpit. "Reinforcements are on the way, ETA 20 minutes, if we can stay ahead of them that long." Riker winced as he sat up, his hand instinctively finding Vila's.
"Is the data secure?" the ambassador confirmed.
"And now, we have something even more valuable.
An Nexarian commander with first-hand evidence of the conspiracy."
Vila's scales darkened with concern.
"I'd betrayed my people."
"No," Riker said firmly, squeezing her hand with surprising gentleness. "You've betrayed corrupt officials who fear change, not your people." Their moment was interrupted by the shuttle's alarm system blaring to life. 2 pursuit vessels closing fast.
Torres shouted. "Defensive maneuvers won't be enough.
They're military grade." Vila moved to the weapons console, her forearms working in perfect coordination across the unfamiliar human controls. "I can target their propulsion systems without causing catastrophic damage." "These are your colleagues," Riker reminded her, struggling to his feet to join her.
"Your friends, possibly."
Vila's expression hardened. "Friends don't fire on diplomatic vessels, or conspire to keep species apart out of fear and prejudice." She hesitated, then added more softly, "Besides, I'm beginning to think my future lies in a different direction." Before Riker could respond, the shuttle rocked violently as enemy fire grazed their shields. Return fire authorized, Torres commanded, her diplomatic polish giving way to military authority.
Disable only, if possible. Vila's targeting was impeccable. The first pursuing vessel spun away, its engines crippled, but life support intact. The second, however, evaded her shot and closed rapidly. We can't outrun them, Vila announced, frustration evident in her voice.
And their shields are too strong for our weapons. Riker moved beside her, his tactical display showing the approaching enemy.